The Cardinals, it's pretty obvious they're going to be leaning heavily on their farm system in the next 2 or 3 years in particular. If they're not going to really go into kind of the type of spending spree we've seen from some other teams, they're still going to lean in hard on their player development system. So I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, well, let's start with Jordan Walker. When would you expect to see him with the big club?
I would think sometime into 2023, several months probably. He has no experience at AAA yet, and as talented as he is, there's going to be a temptation to rush him along, and maybe he'll push the Cardinals' hand by coming to spring camp and performing so well they can't send him down. I know the organization is extremely high on Jordan Walker, but he's still only 20 years old, and so it's not as if he needs to be pushed. But if he's one of the best 3 outfielders in spring training, then, yeah, maybe he'll make the team. But if he's not one of the top 3 outfielders, then he's going to go to Memphis and play every day until, his performance dictates it and an opportunity opens up.
And, I saw in a recent interview he had, I think with STL Today, that he commented that, he's really feeling good about his play in the outfield and he likes it. But he also acknowledged that I think he said something like that's the thing he's least comfortable with right now because it's new, still relatively new. So I want to ask you, from your reports, and you have a correspondent on the ground in all these minor league affiliates, the Cardinals, at thecardinalnation.com. What have been the reports to your best understanding about the quality of his defense in the outfield?
I also had the opportunity to spend a week watching Walker play outfield in the Arizona Fall League as recently as about 6 weeks ago. So, I did see him play out there. He played a little bit of center when I was there, but mostly right field. And, he's a big man. There's no doubt about it. But he moves very, very well. And I did not see any misplays, and he has a very, very good arm. There's no doubt about the arm that Jordan Walker has. But he's not going to be a major league center fielder. Dylan Carlson will be that guy as long as he's around. But I think Jordan Walker could play right field in the major leagues right away. But I think a little more seasoning in the minor leagues certainly would not hurt. And the more comfortable the player is, the more confident he's going to be in all of his game, including being at the plate, not worrying about his fielding.
Brian Walton with us from thecardinalnation.com. When we talk about his offense, look, he's got it all. I'm not looking to nitpick, but one thing that would come up when I would read, independent sites that evaluate prospects, and, they try to do a really good job. They're not doing hot take stuff. That there was talk about maybe him hitting the ball on the ground too much. Do you agree, or has that gotten better?
I mean, I think he hits the ball hard. I mean, look at his hard hit numbers, and I think the defense, the change that's going to come, with banning the shift is going to help Jordan Walker as well. I think he's just got a long swing. Again, he's a big man, but I don't think offensively that there should be really any concerns about Jordan Walker and when he reaches the major leagues. I don't think he's going to be a double play machine or anything like that. And by the way, he has good speed. He just fell short of being a 20-20 man at Double-A this year, where 20 home runs and 20 stolen bases. And again, we're talking about a guy who, not only can hit for power, but can also run very, very well and had a very, very high success rate stealing bases. So, I wouldn't be worried about that.
I want to ask you about Alec Burleson because, for all intents and purposes, he's still a prospect. I think he had 48 plate appearances in the big leagues, and that's not enough to make any judgment, right? And listen, we talked about him a lot last year when you came on with us. And obviously, you can just see he's got a really good swing. He's got really good plate discipline. It didn't translate into immediate success. But I want to ask you, because it's not like all you do is follow the prospects. You follow the Cardinals very closely as well.
That's right.
Do you think Alec Burleson, the fact that they have not added a left-handed bat for the outfield, do you think Alec Burleson's one of those reasons? I mean, how do you believe the Cardinals see him specifically for 2023?
I don't think we necessarily should read into anything about the Cardinals not having made any signings. If we think about last year, the Cardinals waited until spring training almost opened when they brought in both Albert and Corey Dickerson. So, as much as you think the roster might be set, they still may be doing some, bargain shopping late in camp. And guys like Burleson, as much as, folks want to see him stick in the major leagues, he still has minor league options for a couple more years. So there's no hurry if he doesn't stick right away from the Cardinals' perspective. Now, to answer your question, I see Alec Burleson as a average over power kind of guy. He's going to have some power, but, he's not going to be your prototypical corner outfield bopper guy like Jordan Walker's probably going to be. So the question you have to ask yourself, is that what you want in your corner? He's certainly a better fielder than Juan Yepez, but probably an average defender at best. And so, the question is Burleson going to be a starter, or is he going to be a fourth outfield corner guy? And the jury's out on that, but certainly, as you said, one of his best advantages is that he hits left-handed on a team that needs some left-handed bats. So, let's face it, Tyler O'Neill hasn't exactly been an Iron Man. So, if and when he goes back on the injured list again, you like to have a guy like Burleson who's ready to step into the lineup.
Absolutely. By the way, you mentioned Juan Yepez, and our guest is my friend Brian Walton from thecardinalnation.com. And, again, that's the site. Check it out while we're talking. But you got to pay attention to Brian, though, thecardinalnation.com. You mentioned Juan Yepez, and it's really interesting. I mean, I don't know if he saved the Cardinals, but he certainly came up big at a time they needed it early in the season. And then he leveled off a little bit. He was lunging in a lot of pitches, and then he got hurt. I think people, not totally, but I think people tended to forget about him a little. And he certainly reminded everybody what he could do when he hit that 2-run home run off the Phillies in Game 1. What is your anticipation of Yepez going forward? I mean, after all, the dude did slug .447 in the major leagues last year. But do you see him having a prominent role?
I think it'll get down to how they use a designated hitter position, Bernie. I don't think Juan is a starting any kind of fielder on a championship team. I think that he's a bat, and he's, as you said, he's got a very good bat, and he's a guy that can, hit home runs and big hits in crucial situations. And if they want to use the designated hitter position more for one player, like they did with Albert, last year, then I think Juan is a guy who most logically fits that job. But then again, we haven't talked about Nolan Gorman either, and right. Nolan Gorman's a guy that the Cardinals certainly haven't given up on. So, as you said, they've got all these young players, and, of course, we haven't even mentioned Brendan Donovan, all these young players that they're trying to figure out ways to get at bats for. And, that may not all be at St. Louis all the time. There may be some, moving back up and down like we saw last year.
I've been asked this question a lot, Brian, so I'm going to dish it off to you because you know much more than I do about Yvonne Herrera or Ivan Herrera. He was in and over his little head when he came to the major leagues, got a little bit of feel for it. Maybe that was just the whole point, just to give him a little feel for it. And then he went back to the minors. With Contreras coming aboard, and it seems like the Cardinals still like Kisner, does Herrera fit in at all in 2023? I mean, other than being an injury replacement, what's your forecast on him going forward?
I think right now, Yvonne Herrera hasn't done anything to displace Andrew Kisner. I mean, we know Contreras is the guy. He's going to be the guy for several more years. But right now, Yvonne Herrera has done well in the minor leagues, but when he came up, he didn't impress. I'm not sure that he was necessarily ready mentally for what he was expecting or what he discovered when he got to the majors, and he didn't necessarily have the best impression first time around. So if he goes back to Memphis and puts his head down and gets to work and plays well and hits well, then he could get the opportunity to potentially become the backup rather than Kisner. But that doesn't look like it's going to happen out of spring training.
But you don't think the organization is down on him in any way, do you?
If they were down on him, they'd trade him, right? You trade him.
True,
you trade
right.
him at his peak. Trade him at his peak value, which is right now. And they could easily say, well, listen, we brought in Contreras, and so this kid's blocked now, so we're going to send him off for a starting pitcher or something else. And that still could happen because, listen, today's December 27th. It's not March 27th. So, but I think, if they were down on her, that would be the time to move him.
Brian Walton with us from thecardinalnation.com. Also wanted to ask you about Mason Nguyen, of course, because he's another one that's on the rise. But barring some pretty severe injury issues, do you see him in the major leagues at all in 2023?
Probably not. No. I mean, Mason Nguyen is the shortstop of the future for the Cardinals. I really believe that. If there was anybody who was talked about other than Jordan Walker, among scouts and people down in the Arizona Fall League, it was Mason Nguyen. Tank Hence was probably a close third, but, we'll talk about him in a minute. But Mason Nguyen, only got to Double-A during the season, and he started off a little slowly, played much better toward the league level later on, but he still needs a little more work with the bat. Defensively, he's a very, very solid player. And I think, again, it'll be interesting to see without the shifts in the major leagues, whether guys who are, really, really strong athletes will, again, have an increased value at shortstop. I think a guy like Mason Nguyen, has that ability, that natural ability that he can make very difficult plays look routine. And I don't think he's going to necessarily be there this year, but when the Paul DeJong situation gets resolved, and then they can decide, because Tommy Edman has shown the ability to play both second base and shortstop very proficiently. So it doesn't take anything away from the Cardinals, certainly when Mason Nguyen finally does come up.
All right, let's talk about pitching prospects. And I really did. I know it's tough because some of the guys that they project as starters could also help in the bullpen, a la Zach Thompson. So it's a little bit of it's not necessarily a linear thing. Some of these guys can help in both ways. But if the Cardinals had a need for a starter, a real need for a starter, who would be the guy, in your opinion, that they would turn to first? I'm not talking about maybe some of the guys that are here already. But if you want to say Zach Thompson, that's cool with me. But I'm talking about guys that have not really been in the majors yet. Who looms as the best starter in the short term?
Well, I don't want to go without mentioning the name Matthew Liberatore, because a year ago, we thought he was going to be the guy, and he didn't do what you wanted to see. And some of that was I'm not sure what it was, whether it was a mental thing or what it was, but Matthew Liberatore has the stuff to be a successful major league pitcher, but he struggled in AAA for part of the year. He's the number one guy right now, but there's two guys who were drafted just, not that long ago, 2021, who moved through the system very quickly, were very, very successful last season, and I'm talking about Gordon Graceffo and Michael McGreevy. And both those guys got enough time in Double-A that they could be on the Memphis staff to open the season. And Graceffo, even though he was a fifth-rounder, McGreevy was a first-rounder, Graceffo is the guy that everybody seems to have their eye on right now. And, we saw what Andre Palante did, basically coming from Double-A the year before. And I'm not saying that Gordon Graceffo is going to make the team out of spring training, but I think those guys could, when I say those guys, I mean Graceffo and McGreevy, with a few months at AAA, they might be, move ahead of Liberatore in the line to be the next, the de facto number 6 starter, so to speak.
And Graceffo, because he throws so hard, and coming out of the bullpen, he'd probably be good for a pretty high strikeout rate. Could you see Graceffo getting called up to be used as a reliever?
We've seen that happen before with pitchers who were starters. I'm going to go back to a point you made about earlier, Bernie, because it's a good one, and that is the Cardinals typically, whether they project a guy as a reliever or a starter down the road, they're going to have them start probably until the very last minute. For example, Trevor Rosenthal never came out of the bullpen a single game in the minor leagues. And in the major leagues, he never started a single game. So they, and the reason why they do that, why they kept Trevor Rosenthal and all the other guys starting, is because the routine of every fifth day means they're going to get their innings. They're going to be able to pitch deep enough into games. They can use all their pitches. They can feel what it's like when they're tired. They can feel what it's like to face a lineup multiple times, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think definitely, I think Carlos Martinez did it. I think Dakota Hudson did it. When there isn't a starting opportunity, but you're one of the best 12 or 13 pitchers, then, yeah, the Cardinals bring you in and put you in the bullpen, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stay there forever. And I think Graceffo is a guy that they view as a future starter. But if their need is such that they think he can give them some help out of the pen, yeah, I think they would definitely consider that.
Brian, give us, please, 2 or 3 names of pitchers that Well, we haven't talked about in this particular conversation, but in general, a couple of or three pitching prospects that could be fast movers that there maybe needs to be more discussion about. Some guys that could surprise us. Because I don't know how many people heard of Andre Palante a year ago. You know, you did, your people did, but a lot of people didn't. I'm talking about that kind of guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I mentioned his name briefly, and folks have probably heard about him already, but Tank Hence is the guy that, you know, he was drafted in the same class as Jordan Walker and Mason Nguyen, where Walker was taken first, Nguyen was second. Tank Hence was taken third, high school pitcher from the South, moved very, very slowly. He was in low A Palm Beach this last season, and they kept him around 60 pitches an outing. Not a big kid, about 5'11", but you know, he went down to the Arizona Fall League at the end of the year and, you know, pitched like a veteran. He's a guy that very well has moved slowly to this point, but could move very, very quickly, and is a guy that, you know, has all kinds of future potential, and definitely could be a starter down the road. Another guy that, you know, the Cardinals have this thing where, and it makes sense, the guys they draft, the pitchers that they draft in a given year, they don't usually pitch much at all that first year because they've already pitched in their college season. They've thrown probably 100 innings, and the Cardinals want to be careful that first season. So Cooper Jerpy, who was their first rounder this last year, very, very impressive young man, has high velocity deep into games. But you know, he could be a future reliever as well. But a very, very impressive guy who has yet to throw in a professional pitch. So we'll see him. You know, he might start out at high A Palm Beach, but a left-hander. He's another guy that we'll be talking about a year from now for sure.
Brian Walton, before we say goodbye to you for now, tell us about the CardinalNation.com and what fans will get for taking out a subscription to your excellent site, which is just loaded with content. It never stops. So just give us the rundown, because I want to make sure people take a chance on this because they don't know what they're missing. It's so good.
Folks can come to the Cardinal Nation 365 days a year and find new original content about the St. Louis Cardinals minor league system. I'm talking about Christmas and New Year's. It doesn't matter. And we pride ourselves in going deeper than anyone on the Cardinals minor league system. Right now, we have a top 50 prospect unveiling that we go through every year. We start at number 50 and work our way down to number 1. About every fifth article is free, so people can see the depth of scouting reports, the depth of analysis that we provide about these guys. But to read them all, you need to subscribe. And nobody ever asks for their money back because they see what they get. If you care about the minor leagues, it's a place to go. We have people watching the winter leagues very carefully because some of these young players, the Yepez's and the Gomez's, for Moises Gomez, of course, who was the minor league home run champion, and others are playing in winter ball in Venezuela and Dominican Republic and around the globe. So we have reports on them every week. And so really, and anytime any transaction occurs, of course, we break down those moves and we explain what they mean for the players that are there and the players that are coming in. So lots and lots of information year-round. Of course, winter warm-ups coming up, so we'll be there as everyone else will. We'll talking to some of these prospects and providing fresh news as we get closer to spring training.
Well, that sounds good. I mean, keep up the great work. It's so valuable. And, again, the Cardinals are so dependent, and it's been such a strength for quite a long time, their player development system. But to me, it has added importance. It's always important, but it has added importance going forward because they have some pitchers in particular that are close. And obviously, Jordan Walker is waiting off stage for his turn, which will be soon enough. So people need to really, really be in tune, be in line with knowing all that they can know about Cardinals prospects. And thecardinalnation.com is the place to go. So absolutely consider taking out a subscription. We'll talk soon. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks for having me on again, Bernie.
You got it. That's our guy, Brian Walton. I like him very much and appreciate all that he does.